The committee of the whole will please come back to order, and I would call everybody's attention to the item that's entitled Amendment List by Topic, and this item lists all the amendments in very brief summary form that were submitted to the chair by last week, and they're arranged under each topic. And we're going to basically take them in the order that are presented here and just discuss each of the items and vote on them. Before we start to do that, I would ask my colleagues for planning purposes whether any of my colleagues or the administration have any amendments that they plan to submit today that are not included on this list. Okay, so we'll continue on to the first item, and I would ask Councilman Greenspan if he would want to, yes, Councilman Germana.
Mr. Chairman, just to be clear, the 3-page letter we got from the executive, these are all included in this?
That is correct.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
What we did, and I checked with the administration to make sure that it was their intent, and it was. The administration sent us a list of all changes that they approve of. And I asked them whether anything that was not on that list they would ask to be amended to conform to their list. And the administration said yes. And if you look through this list, particularly under the human services items, where on the amendment list by topic, it'll say executive, and it has the amendments needed to conform to what the executive has in their letter.
Thank you.
Okay, so I would ask Councilman Greenspan if you would wish to move your first amendment, which is to delete the specific funding for the Department of Consumer Affairs.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'll be glad to, but my, and I only speak to myself and not the executive. I'm not going to comment on the executive. I see my name is next to his on this. My amendment was not to delete, but to defer. My amendments in total were, I don't believe I requested the deletion of any funding, just merely either in my thought process, either was an agreement with the amendments or recommended a deferral till the mid-year fiscal review pending the revenue modifications or adjustments that I believe may be coming, and Councilman Schron alluded to earlier. So my amendment may be different than the executive's. Mine is to defer till the mid-year fiscal review, not to delete.
Well, in terms of the process, and maybe the budget director or the law department can advise on this, but I think the idea of deferral is very useful in terms of intent, but I don't know in terms of a budget resolution that appropriates money how we say that we're going to defer it. I mean, do we say that it is appropriated, but none of it can be spent until July 1st, 2012, and I don't know that that's your intent either. I mean, basically your intent is that we not spend the money until after we've had the mid-year review, and if that's what we're going to do, then I think that it has to be taken out of the budget resolution, which provides appropriations.
Okay, so if So if that's, under that scenario, then the way you have it worded, then it would be correct. Then if it's a thumbs up or a thumbs down and no deferral in the offing, then I will accept the language that's here, make a motion then to delete the funding for 75,000 in 2012 and 100,000 in 2013.
I would ask Director Rubino if you could tell us whether you believe there's any way that we could write a resolution item that that defers but does not eliminate an item.
Well, Mr. Chairman, the only way would be to have, I guess, a separate section within the budget ordinance stating that. That'd be the most direct way. Because the items that fall within the body of that budget ordinance we prepare are items that are actually appropriated, so you could treat it like the other non-budgetary items that are in the individual sections of the ordinance. For example, the Metro Health section, the section on the automation reserve, that's one way to treat it.
Mr. Chairman, my intent would be that we would defer these items, and maybe if we put it as a separate appropriation coming out of the reserve at the bottom of the budget I don't have the document in front of me. And at that point, if the council sees fit to defer and the revenue is there, then we would prioritize the spend at mid-year. But at least the funds would be reserved or encumbered and not spent. That would be my intent.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councilman Tran.
It was my understanding from the last meeting that Mr. Sensenbrenner had suggested that, or I believe Mr. Steen, one of the two, had suggested that there be, before moving to add amendments to it, to the appropriation, that we would wait 6 months to look at that. And I thought that that was what was made from the podium specifically. So if they made that statement to this full body, then we would flip it back to them and ask them, how do you see that being put in the form of the proper way for this language to be written?
Wade Steen, Fiscal Officer, to the council member through the chair. I guess what our anticipation is, when I say ours as the executive, is that we're committed to the consumer affairs vision of what it's going to be. But we also would request that we delete the funding right now, and we will come back to you. We believe we can set up and start the program with existing funding and staff. At the point that we need that funding, our anticipation then we would come back and ask for that funding. That's why I think it's a delete deferral, but it can be deleted. But I guess I want to be clear that we're committed to this. Fuel quality testing is something that we plan to put in place in 2012, as well as the development of a consumer affairs division that will take on the tasks of consumer affairs in addition to the other things that we do. But we're going to come back when we have that in place and ask for that funding. We just don't need that funding now.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you. This concept is something I've been talking to some members of the administration about over a period of time, including Director Steen. And the bill itself is a work in progress and is in Mr. Rogers' committee at present. I'm willing to support the executive's deletion of the further funding for the Department of Weights and Measures / Consumer Affairs Department because I have a faith that I'm on the same page of the administration in terms of what my bill intends to try to accomplish. So in terms of that, I would be certainly willing to support a motion by the executive, a motion by a member of council, and I'm willing to make that motion myself to delete the funding for the Consumer Affairs Department with an understanding that we are working toward the same goal. I would say, however, that I don't support deferral of spending in terms of the budget process that we're involved in, and it might be useful at some point just to establish whether there is any consensus for deferring spending rather than have a long discussion about it. Thank you.
Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, then I'll second Mr. Brady's. Did you make a motion?
I didn't literally make a motion, but whatever is in order.
Councilman Greenspan, would you withdraw your motion?
I never had a second,
Oh,
so.
okay. Okay, so Councilman Brady, you can make the motion.
Well, I would move that under this line item, we would delete the financing for the Consumer Affairs, budgeting for the Consumer Affairs Department for 2012, 2013. I would ask for a second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Director, one other point that we want to make that's important to me, and I think to Councilman Brady, is that when we get this new department up and running, that we don't want the administration to move somebody around that has no specific experience in consumer affairs. We're going to want you to go out and find somebody who has specific experience. And I'm just looking for some indication that you share that perspective.
To the chair, yes, we do share that, and you have our word that we'll do that. And when Councilmember Brady mentioned that he has been working with the administration, he has, and we are on the same page. We just don't need the funding as we stand here today, but we'll be revisiting this topic as we go forward with the Consumer Affairs Division.
Okay. The motion is with the assurances given to take out the specific funding for consumer affairs for $75,000 in 2012 and $100,000 in 2013. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the ayes have it, and that motion becomes part of the resolution. The second item relates to the Planning Commission, and Councilman Greenspan, do you wish to move this item?
I do, Mr. Chair, but Councilman Brady possibly I shouldn't say possibly, he does have good ideas, brought up a good point about the discussion of deferral, because all of my amendments relate to deferring spending pending mid-year review. I leave that up to the chair to determine if he would like to address that issue in total, or have at least the understanding as to how my amendments are structured.
Okay, Councilman Germana.
Mr. Chairman, I think there's a big difference between, if I'm casting a vote to delete versus casting a vote to defer, I think there's a big difference. Voting delete it's out of here, it's gone. Let's not bring this up until we need to. Deferring says, it says that if things are good in a perfect world and we do not have to cut the budget that we just passed 6 months from now, they're worth considering and making a final decision at that time. I like this idea of having a checklist of deferral 6 or 7 months down the road, and if funding is available at that time, I think it's a heck of a lot better than just trashing the idea.
I think that to make a ruling that we could not have deferrals would be arbitrary. It's an option. I would state that it's not an approach that I would generally favor, and particularly not on smaller items, where we should decide whether we want it or we don't. So I probably personally won't vote for many deferral items. I prefer to just say if you want the item, you vote for it, and if you don't, you don't, And when we come to the mid-year review, if we have to make some adjustments, we look at everything and decide what we have to cut. But I also have to say that if someone wants to make a motion in the form of a deferral, which I'm presuming would list an item as not appropriated but reserved. And is that what your intent is?
Exactly. Yeah, it would basically encumber the funds as if it was the Economic Development Fund or the Scholarship Fund. It would just, there'd be one bucket that would have all the items that we deferred pending a revenue review in July, on July 1st. And then let's say that the reserve that we encumbered, just say a number, $300,000. I'm just throwing it out there. And revenues exceed projections and expenses are managed, and there's $300,000 available. Then we would vote to allocate the funds to cover those items that were deferred. On the other side, if the money is not there, if there's only $200,000, let's call it net free cash, then we would have to come back as a body and make decisions of those funds. How much do we wish to appropriate towards the money that we've deferred? If worst case scenario is our numbers are lower, where we're in a net cash position, we're having to utilize our reserves, then those items that were deferred would continue to be deferred because there is no money to cover those funds. So that's theoretically the concept.
Okay. Yes, Councilman Jones.
Does this deferral imply that the monies will be approved or just automatically triggered at that point when certain financial thresholds are reached, or do you still feel you would have to vote on it again at that point?
It would take further action because the money would only be in a reserve fund and it would not be appropriated. So the administration would not have authority to spend any of that money without further action, transferring it out of the reserve fund into an appropriated account.
So does deferral imply that you support it just later, or that?
Yes.
What deferral implies is that you support the item, but you don't know if there's enough money available to be able to afford it, and so you want the decision held off till later. Councilman Brady and then Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my belief that this approach is not a good one. I believe that this throws a lot of confusion into what the county's budget actually is. And the answer to the question about whether a vote for deferral is a vote for an item, I'm not sensing that that's exactly what is actually going to happen here if someone votes for a deferral, that they're actually for the item. And I'm certainly not clear in terms of emotion that that's the case. Whatever suggestions might be made about it. It seems to me that because we can adjust the budget if we need to, and we all know that there will be necessary adjustments throughout the year for a variety of reasons, that we're here to pass a budget and not a budget that defers a budget. So I would suggest that we should make decisions, and then if we need to make adjustments later for reasons that we can quantify, then we do that. But at this point, this council is here to pass a budget and not a budget if come what.
Chairman, I have to support Councilman Brady in that. We're here to make a decision, and if something changes, you make a new decision later.
Okay, Councilman Gallagher.
With all due respect, I think at this point in time, being a new council, being a 2-year budget, most of us are used to a 1-year budget. This is a 2-year budget. Deferral seems to be in order, in my opinion, because what may come is already on the board. The problems in D.C., the problems in Columbus, and the trickle down that have come to Cuyahoga County. We're playing the what-if game with the 5% in property values. We are going to be revisiting this budget. I think it would be easier if we had encumbered funds in a deferral area as opposed to coming all the way back and reorganizing what we're going to do, coming back again. I think it's easier. It's way easier to say no now, but then we're going to come back with more legislation. So if it's encumbered, It's there. And all it is an act of council to okay it for next year. This is a 2-year budget. I'm not really used to 2-year budgets. I'm used to 1-year budgets. So I think for the easiest thing for us to do and the fairest thing for us to do, and regardless of what we feel about if we support something or not, I'll give you an example. The medical examiner, I know that's a good program. And 150, I'm absolutely for the first year. But I want to see where they're at in 2013 before we go ahead with the $500,000. I know the executive disagrees with that and wants to go forward with that, but what if that big train coming down the tracks, number one, say it doesn't make any money. It doesn't do what they think it's going to do, and they run into problems, and maybe they scrap it or they have to go in a different direction. And the housing, by that time, we'll understand if it's 5% or 10%, and if it's 10%, we are going to come back here, and there's going to be no deferral because there's going to be no money. So I think if we defer it, it's easier, but I understand what Mr. Brady's saying. I would prefer to defer it.
Okay, well, we're just gonna go through and vote on the items, and we're on number 2. This is Councilman Greenspan's, and you can make your motion either to defer the item or to remove it from the budget. It's up to you as to how to make your motion.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, Mr. Rogers, Mr. Rogers have a comment? I didn't mean to.
Okay, Rogers and then Simon.
Well, the idea of deferral is appealing. However, I think it creates some long-term problems down the line. It almost gets the feeling that we're expanding the budget process out another 6 months. And then once we put these items in a bucket, how do we make the determination of what in that bucket gets funded? For example, if our revenue projections are right on the money, do we include everything or just some of the items in that bucket? So it seems like, I mean, it's easy for now, but long term, it seems like an expansion of this whole budget process. It makes it difficult for the departments to do proper planning. And like Mr. Miller said, particularly for the small items, it seems like we need to make a decision on that. When I look at the $14,000 for upgrading a person in the planning commission, and with the staff that's so small, that's a big decision item for them. Even though it's a small part of our budget, but it's a big deal for a person to go from full-time to part-time in such a small department. So, I'm fine with the idea that, of allowing folks to make motions to defer, but I do think that it complicates things in the long run.
Councilwoman Simon.
I agree with my colleagues, Rogers, Brady, and Jones, that this will just really complicate it. But I think the second thing I want to say is when we're talking about a 5 to 10% decrease anticipated perhaps in property sales tax revenue, we're mixing apples and oranges when we're looking at general fund dollars and then talking about that kind of, because there's enough reserve in health and human service, even if we do experience the 10%. So that doesn't need really to come into the discussion when we're talking about the general fund. It is what it is. We have a budget, it's projected. I'm not sure what might impact that besides some super committee affecting the health and human service and then having to draw upon general funding. I think that's remote. I think we have the budget. We have our experts who made the projections, and I think it's pretty solid. It's just a question of whether we're going to include those items, and I think now we can do that and go item by item, I suppose, is the only way to do this, but maybe a different way to do it is just to have a general motion on the Greenspan amendment and see if the council wants to chime in on any particular item rather than going one by one by one by one.
Okay. Councilman Greenspan, do you have a motion on item number 2?
Well,
I have a comment before we get.
yeah, and I have a comment on that. First of all, Mr. Steen can address this. We had a conversation. The property tax reappraisal process does affect both the inside and outside millage rates in the general fund. So the impact will not only be on the HHS levy fund, but it'll also be on the general fund as well. And I believe our conversation was it's to a greater magnitude than it would be in the HHS levy fund. So there is an impact there. So 5% drop affects both funds. The reason I bring this up is not because I like saying no. That's actually not what I'm saying here. I'm saying let's 6 months down the road take a look and see where the appraisals will be, because we'll know, we'll have a better feeling in May versus where we are now. The NBA season seems to be resolving itself, and the issue coming out of Washington will have better visibility at that time. These are, and I would say a normal budget year, like Mr. Gallagher said, we're doing a 2-year cycle. These are somewhat extraordinary times with these items that are out there as far as the property reappraisals and the issues coming out of Washington. And as far as making the decision process of a budget, at least at that point, we'll have a finite number to work with and not relying on a reserve, because as we saw just in some amendments today, the AFSCME agreement, the AFSCME contract figures increased that budget by $1.2 million out of the HHS levy fund. So those are just items we need to consider. Now, I'll be glad to go through and make a motion on deferral and stick with my original. If it gets defeated, it gets defeated. We'll go to a motion to delete. If it gets defeated, it gets defeated, and then the motion will stand. But I feel strongly about us being able to establish a process where we encumber funds with the expectation if the money's there in 6 months, then the money will be appropriated based on what's available.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Brady.
Yes, got an interesting discussion going here, I guess. One thing I have to agree with the councilman on is he continues to reference what's going on in Washington, and I think like this is what's going on in Washington. People deferring decisions, people kicking decisions down the road, people saying we'll make the decision later. The budget is always a moving item. It's never stagnant. And I just hope that my colleague would be willing to entertain a motion to have a discussion about this issue of deferral, see where the consensus in the body is. And if the consensus in the body is that we go item by item and include deferral as part of the discussion, that we do that. And if we don't spend hours doing that.
Councilman Schwan.
Mr. Miller, thank you, Mr. Miller, Mr. Chairman. I think that obviously that there's some disagreement here as far as the effect on both the general fund and the Health and Human Services levy as far as its impact on the property valuation. It seems to me that if we have disagreement at two ends of this, we ought to at least ask Mr. Steen about that and get perfectly clear as to its impact first on that.
To the council member through the chair, thank you for the chance to talk about our property tax revenue projection. As we stated initially, we're projecting revenues from property tax to decrease 5% in 2013, the second year. We really don't see much impact in 2012 because property values are staying the same. Now, something I want to caution, because if people are watching and listening, if they get a 10% reduction in their property value, their taxes don't go down 10%. There's a reduction factor that plays into, let me give you a scenario. If everybody in Cuyahoga County's property values went down 20%, they would all pay the exact same tax, because the reduction factor will level out the tax they're going to pay, because a 4.8 mil levy is to generate a certain amount of revenue. So I think we want to be careful when we read articles about how much property values are going to go down. We do believe that a 5% reduction in property tax revenue for the levy fund is reasonable as we stand here today. I think you heard Director Rubino mention we'll know a lot more once we get through the reappraisal process. Councilmember Greenspan also mentioned it does have an effect on inside millage, because inside millage, unlike other millage, will actually go down with the value, and the general fund gets inside millage. So we will see some reduction in general fund revenue due to the decline in property values. But our budget is not driven by property tax revenue as much as the HHS levy fund budget. I do believe, as I stand here, and we would tell you, Matt and I have talked about this, if we didn't think the 5% reduction in revenue in 2013 was good as we stand here. It doesn't mean that if the wheels come off, we're not back talking with you in 8 months and you have to make some other decisions. But as we stand here today, we think that reduction in revenue is reasonable. But it will affect the general fund. I think someone mentioned it affects the HHS levy fund. It affects both funds. Hopefully that clarifies our levy estimate.
It does, but my follow-on question now that you're up there was it your recommendation that we defer additional expenditures beyond what you brought forth as the budget, with the exception of the corrective actions that we did today and those brought forth by the county executive?
To the council member through the chair, to clarify what I was asking for when I was initially here, when I was asking not to do anything, was to accept the executive's budget, which would have meant no increases, and then wait 6 months. The budget is a moving object, and then if you feel necessary to appropriate more dollars, you do that. It wasn't necessarily a deferral as much as don't add more dollars at that point. Now, I understand through deliberations and through the executive and council, there are some things that you want to add to this budget. My request as your fiscal officer at that point was, let's not increase the budget at this point, let's wait. But I also understand that you make those decisions as council with the executive, and you're going to make some increases. I guess I would request that you make as few as possible until we get into the next year and see how things are going.
Now they have them up there, I wanted to make my comments to Mr. Brady's and Mr. Greenspan's. Thank you. Okay. In regards to the concept of deferral, I too am not a big fan of that concept, because I think you need to make a decision up or down in regards to it. I do understand that to come back and review it in 6 months would be, in my opinion, the preferred, which is tantamount to the deferral at that point in time. And I believe that we have professionals that have come forward in the form of the budget, and the execution of those activities is that of the county executive. It's not the county council's job to execute. He has put forth a budget, and I believe that he has that obligation to carry it out. And so with that, I'm going to stay with the recommendations of the county executive as brought forward in his suggestions throughout this voting process.
To my colleagues, I think that we're all reasonable people. You're the best group of colleagues that I've ever worked with. And I don't think we're going to have to go through multiple different kind of motions on a long list of items. You know, I think if we can work our way through a few items, I think that patterns are going to emerge as to whether the council is open to deferrals or whether we want items voted up or down, and after a while we're gonna get a rhythm. So I would ask if we could try to do that. But Councilwoman Simon, it's yours.
That's okay. We'll just do that. I guess I just want to address Councilman Schron that this council does have the authority and the obligation to as a co-equal branch of government to set forth our own vision and our own policy that we believe in. That's exactly why we have this new charter government. It's a check and a balance. The executive's budget is, if you're right, it's a product of professionals who have set forth numbers that they've projected. And what this council has brought forth is a reasonable response to that. We have reserves that are healthy. And I believe we keep talking about doomsday, about super committees and reduction of property values. And why don't we talk about the optimism that I think we're going to see with our general fund revenue going up? And I think we're only talking about one side of the equation. So let's look at the other side, that with the things we're seeing in Cuyahoga County, I think we might see an upswing. That's my comment. And I think it's our obligation as council to assert our own vision. And it's not, unfortunately or fortunately, it's relative what we were given, but that's what we have as a co-equal branch. And I hope, as a cohesive team, we can move forward with an outcome that's going to be balanced and productive for our county.
Councilman Greenspan.
Mr. Chair, let me try to cut through this then. What I'll do is, if it's okay with the chairman, is make a motion to accept the concept of deferral for 6 months pending the review. If it passes, great. If not, then what I would recommend, and I was looking to see how to do it within the amendments as they're structured here because they're by topic, is all of my amendments, I would be willing to take those amendments as a consent agenda, unless somebody wishes to pull something off, and vote all of mine. I think I have 24, although I would like to take number 3 off, that's on your list, the IT Enterprise Reserve. I am in favor of maintaining that. So all of my, I guess, sole amendments I'd be willing to take as a consent agenda, unless the council member wishes to pull one off and vote on individually.
I know it's going to take some time, but I would really like to go through it item by item.
That's, you're the chair, it's your decision.
And because on some of them, the administration is with you, and so if we don't accept yours, we haven't discussed what the administration wants to do. You know, I think if we can, I don't think it's going to take as long as people envision if we get to it.
Okay.
Would you like to make a motion on item number 2?
Well, I will, but let me ask you, would it be more expeditious to make a motion on the concept of deferral, and if it fails, then all of mine will just remain deletes?
If you're willing to do that, that would be fine, but I don't want to force that on you.
No, that's fine, I'm willing to
Okay.
stand on that, so I haven't made it yet. Okay, it's, all right, it's made and seconded, so. I don't
Okay.
think there's discussion.
What?
Beat this horse.
Please proceed with the motion.
Okay. I'll make a motion that during the budget process, that items may be identified for deferral into an encumbrance account pending a 6-month or mid-year budget review to determine if funding is available to appropriate towards those items.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, so we're going to vote on whether or not for this budget process we're going to do deferrals. And if you vote yes, that means we're going to consider motions for deferrals. If we vote no, it means that everything we consider, we're going to consider to either include it in the budget or not in the budget, and it would not be deferrals. Is there any discussion?
The only reason I'll support it for the purpose of this motion is so that we can support what the chair asked to be done. So I intend to vote for that for purposes asking the chair to support.
Any other discussion? Call the roll.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes.
Ms. Simon?
A no means that we're not deferring.
That's right. It means we're not going to consider deferrals. We're going to vote everything either into the resolution or not.
Mr. Greenspan?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
No.
Mr. Germana?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. Schron?
Yes.
Ms. Conwell? No. Mr. Jones?
Actually, I'm not clear. No or yes, which one?
No. Yes means that we're going to consider deferral of items. No means we're not going to consider deferrals.
No.
And Ms. Conley?
No.
6 yeas, 5 nays. Motion carries.
Okay, so that means motions for deferral are in order.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, my colleagues on both sides of the argument. The Amendment 2, Planning Commission, I'll read it as on the amendment list, to defer upgrade a business administrator to full-time at $14,318 per year. So that's a motion. I make a motion to defer.
Okay. Is there any discussion?
We need a second.
Is there a second? Hearing no second, that motion fails. So the upgrade of the business administrator will stay in the resolution. Okay?
Mr. Chair, I wish to remove this amendment.
Okay. Any that the council members only submitted a list of possible amendments that they might offer. Any that people don't want to offer, they don't have to offer. So this one is withdrawn. Right. Okay. Number 4. Number 2 failed for lack of a second. Number 3 was withdrawn.
I'm sorry, Mr.
What is the-
Chair,
what is
I'm
the question?
confused. So the deferral of the upgrade of the business administrator, there was no second to that. But
Right,
does
so
that mean? does
that motion failed, and so that means that the substitute resolution remains as it is with regard to that item, which is that the upgrade of business administrator to full-time was included.
Was included, okay,
So it
thank you.
remains included.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and item number 3 was withdrawn. We go on to item number 4.
Chair, can we just be clear on number 1? Number 1, we're deferring, correct?
Number 1, it was not a motion to defer. Number 1 was not included in the budget resolution. We passed the motion to delete the funding, so the budget does not include the spending for the Consumer Affairs Department. We're going with the administration's belief that they're committed to the program, but believe it can be funded within the existing resources. That's a very large office, and they have the capacity. Okay.
Mr.
So-
Chair, I'm sorry.
Number 4?
I wish to remove number 4.
Number 4 is removed, okay. And
How do you want to handle that?
number 5, I'm going to make a motion, and the motion is to remove the supervisor salary adjustment for the public defender. And the reason for making this motion is that we had a discussion with the executive, and the executive indicated their preference that rather than picking out 1 or 2 areas where pay equity items exist, they would prefer to deal with it in a comprehensive fashion. And I'm willing to support the administration on that request. And after we deal with this motion, if it's approved, then I'm going to call upon Councilman Gallagher to offer his amendment, which would call for a pay equity study to be done for both the public defender and the county prosecutor.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Are we deferring or are we deleting?
Oh, no, this is not a deferral. This simply removes the item from the budget.
I'm sorry, I was under the impression that all of Mr. Greenspan's ordinances.
I made the motion.
Oh, you made the motion.
I made the motion.
Sorry.
Okay. The motion is to delete the supervisor salary adjustment pending a pay equity study. Any discussion?
Is a pay equity study budgeted?
My indication, my understanding is that the pay equity study would not be an expensive undertaking. It can be done within existing resources. Okay. Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes, and the supervisor salary adjustment is removed from the budget resolution. Councilman Gallagher.
Thank you, Chairman. I would, we talked a lot about this, and it seemed to come to a conclusion that the best way to go about this would be, and to answer Councilwoman Simon, this would be in-house mostly, so the cost would be minimal if there was any cost at all. And I would move to amend resolution number 2011-0291, adopting the 2012-2013 biennial operation budget and capital improvements program, to add the following language to the resolution. It would be a new section, and it would read as such: the Executive's Office, in coordination with the Human Resources Commission, shall provide to the council a market salary survey of both the county prosecutor and the public defender offices in an effort to ensure pay equity. The survey shall be submitted to council no later than March 16, 2012. Not later than 60 days after the completion of that survey, the Executive's Office shall report to council on how best to implement the results. And what that will do will give the executive the opportunity to formulate the data and then bring it back to the council. And while we do recognize there are many divisions within the county where pay equity is an issue, this would be a starting point. So this would be the beginning, not the end.
I second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded for Councilman Gallagher's amendment. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And Councilman Gallagher's amendment will become part of the resolution. The next item is my item. I would make a motion to reduce the overtime allocation in the sheriff's office by $500,000 per year. The current allocation is in excess of $6 million. This would be a 7 to 8% reduction. I actually believe that a larger reduction might be achievable, but we want to set a number that is realistic and achievable, and provides encouragement that controlling these overtime expenses be a high priority. There is a second. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Councilman Schwan and then Germana.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going the other way. I thought you looked over there, and you did hear it. In reflection of an incident that would take place where overtime was necessary, will we have to come back, Mr. Bino, if we had a court case like we've had right now, to allocate that time if the circumstances require that?
Mr. Chairman and Councilman Schron, if the expenses exceed the anticipated budget for overtime, the first step we could take, OBM could take, was to do a budget adjustment, which does not require council approval. We could move dollars between the fringe benefits line and salary if there's enough capacity there. The second step would be to request a budget realignment as part of the biweekly fiscal agenda, which we would do. We wouldn't have unless there's one specific case or event, we wouldn't have a notion if they're meeting their target until at least first quarter, maybe mid-year. So I wouldn't anticipate having to come to council with any change in their appropriation level, whether it's an additional or a transfer of appropriation.
So though this is a nice thing to make a recommendation on that, if the circumstances require, overtime is going to be authorized and it will be paid.
That's correct, Councilman Schron. The first thing would be the implementation of overtime. The budget would merely follow suit. If the sheriff has to deploy additional overtime hours as a management tool, we would come to you and request appropriation to cover that. That'd be secondary to the actual implementation of additional overtime hours above the appropriation.
I'll support the motion, but it's symbolic. It's not going to be operational. I didn't really.
Well, I think that directors have a lot of pride in meeting their budget targets, if at all possible. You know, and I think what this amendment does is send a message and put forth a realistic goal of what I think can easily be achieved if it's given priority attention, and that's what the purpose is, and I think they will reach this number, and I think it'll be helpful. Councilman Germana.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with what you want to accomplish, but cutting the sheriff's budget by $500,000, we're talking about the jail, security of buildings, and so on. And you know, having dealt with overtime in police departments, fire departments, when you're counting for the safety force to be there, we're counting for the buildings to be secure and so on. I agree with reducing that overtime, but I support the sheriff. He thinks that that's the right amount that he needs. I'd like to see him have it reduced, but my vote's going to be no on this.
Any other discussion? Councilwoman Simon.
I'm going to vote yes on this, and it was after the discussion we had in open hearing with the sheriff, who admitted, at least stated, that he was overestimating his OT significantly. So I am going to agree with the sheriff.
Any other discussion? Clerk will call the roll.
Calling the roll for item number 6. Mr. Rogers? Yes. Ms. Simon? Yes. Mr. Greenspan?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Mr. Germana?
No.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. Schron?
Yes.
Ms. Conwell? Yes. Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, that item is included as part of the budget resolution, and the next item belongs to the council president.
You have in your packet, ladies and gentlemen, an amendment that I propose. It reads as follows: the clerk shall provide to council a comprehensive plan to collect the delinquent fines, fees, and other related court costs still owed to the clerk of courts in 2002. The plan shall be submitted to council no later than January the 16th, 2012. A more aggressive plan similar to those found in other jurisdictions or based on best practices to collect these delinquent fines and fees would have a positive impact on the general fund revenue. And the reason for this is basically to send a message to the clerk that we've been working with him in terms of the task force, the debt collection task force, and we want to make it clear that we want a plan to come in here. I've spent a lot of time talking to various lawyers over the last couple of weeks who've given me some very good suggestions about ways in which we can collect additional revenue, and if necessary, we'll have a hearing or bring some of those people into the task force, bring them to the council. But there's some ways to collect some money out there. I know we're not going to collect all of it, but if we collected 10%, it'd be $5 million, a whole lot more than we have. So I think there's some practices out there, and we just want a plan from the clerk, and I'd appreciate your support on this.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been moved and seconded. This is an area where the council is being very conservative because we strongly believe that we can do better and that we can raise more money. However, no specific amount is incorporated into the budget resolution, so whatever we're able to get would be a positive variance that would help balance off someplace else where we might have a problem. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to put forth an amendment to the council president to move the date from January 16th. You're coming through 6 weeks of with holidays and time frame. I think that just in fairness, if they have not spent the time, to give them a little bit longer time might be a suggestion to give them another month or two.
No, Mr. Tron, we've been on this. I've had discussions with them within the last 6 weeks.
They can hit that?
They should be, because they've been forewarned numerous times.
Okay.
Yeah. I agree with you. You want to be, but I think they've had some. They have a deadline with us. December the 8th is our next meeting, so that gives them a month, more than a month after December 8th. So they've had plenty of time to anticipate this.
My only reflection is that month involves 2 weeks of traditional holiday time. So if they can get it done, I'd rather have a good work product than a fast work product.
Well, I think anything we get is better than we've gotten. So.
Okay. That's not a standard.
Anything else on this? All those in favor of the council president's amendment say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it, and that item becomes part of the resolution. On item number 8, the medical examiner, I would.
Mr. Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I respectfully remove that,
Uh,
unless you support.
I do. I would like to move that amendment.
I wanted to defer, and do you want to do that?
This would be a motion to simply delete the funding for 2012 or for 2013, and I would share that I had discussions with the executive about this item, and what the administration strategy on this item is that they want to make improvements to the crime lab, and they're hoping that with the improvements that they can get other communities to buy into the system and to make it self-sustaining. And that's something that's difficult to do and may happen and may not. And what we would like to do is to fund the first year, the 2012, for the full amount requested at $150,000, and then during the course of the year, we would be able to review both our budgetary situation and also to measure whether we're making the kind of progress with the crime lab that we hope to be making, and the executive said that he would not be greatly concerned if we did this, as long as we provide the first year funding for $150,000 so that we can get started. So for that reason, I do move this item that we fund the crime lab at $150,000 in 2012, but that we delete the 2013 funding so that it can be reviewed later.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. I didn't know if I'd have support for deferral, so if we go with delete, that's fine.
Yeah, okay. Is there a second? Second. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it, and that item is included, which deletes the 2013 funding for the crime lab, but keeps the 2012 funding in place. The next item that we come to is the disparity study, and I would like to call forward whoever from the executive would be prepared to speak to this item. It's in the current budget at $400,000, and the executive believes that we can do it at a much lower number and is recommending $100,000. And I would like to ask the director to give us more information on how that would work.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess first I want to make it clear that the executive and the administration strongly supports conducting a disparity study, but having done this type of consulting work, what typically happens is someone will come in and they'll tell you to go gather all kinds of information, all the while charging you for that work. What we'd like to do initially is to engage 2 master's, possibly degree candidates from Cleveland State or a local institution that can help with that data gathering, working with OPD over the summer, so that the bulk of the work can be done in-house. We believe $100,000 will allow us enough money to engage outside expertise to complete the project, but we did not feel we needed $500,000 to do this. But we are committed to doing this. We would want to do as much in-house as we could and then rely upon the experts to help us complete the project and deliver it to council for consideration.
Chairman? Yes. The dollar amount of $500,000 was originally submitted based on Broward County's disparity study. So that was where that original dollar amount came from, not to exceed $500,000. So we arrived at $400,000 based on that. After talking with the administration, I also philosophically in support of doing as much in-house as possible. So I'm willing to make that concession towards the $100,000. But what I would like to know is how you arrived at that dollar amount of $100,000.
To the council member, through the chair, the Broward County study, which you referenced in talking with Jeff Mowry, cost more than $1 million to find out that they didn't have any disparity issue. The $500,000 I know was about half of that study. I chose $100,000 based upon my experience in the consulting field. If you just factor at $100 to $200 per hour, how many hours that could buy us, and knowing what we can do internally. We may have to come back, as we've talked about here already today, and adjust that budget if we find out that's not enough money. But that amount was arrived at by me using a number of hours and an hourly billing rate of between $100 and $200 per hour, which I think would be reasonable and fair if we got a local practitioner. That's I shouldn't say local, as there are people that specialize in this area, and Ernst and Winnie, that's where I started. Ernst & Young now is headquartered right here. They might be a logical group to partner with once we get all the original data gathered. But Councilmember, I came up with that estimate myself.
So if the 100,000 is close but not sufficient, you'd be looking for, be supportive of a request for more dollars to meet the need as we know what it really is.
To the Councilmember through the chair, clearly if we need more dollars to give you the product that you want, we would come back. But we believe we can do it with that. But if it's not enough, we'll be back.
Thank you.
Ms. Simon.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to clarify on this amendment, somehow my recommendation was a deferral, not a delete. So I just definitely want to clarify that there was never a recommendation to delete this funding in its entirety. So, yeah.
Good.
But I agree with the 100.
Mr. Chair.
Okay. Councilman Greenspan.
I have a question. Yeah. I got a whisper in my ear over here. It says $100,000 per year. It's a flat $100,000 one-time request, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
It's only one time. Yes.
And then, Mr. Chair, since the I know the answer to this question. Since the administration has stated that they would not begin until the summer, presumably June or July, then there's a motion to delete. Is that the motion right now on the floor?
No motion has been made yet.
Okay, so I have a motion to defer, and I'll defer the executive's 100,000 pending mid-year budget review.
So is your motion to defer this item to mid-year review and to reserve it at 100,000?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I can clarify to Councilmember Greenspan, we wouldn't necessarily have to wait till summer to begin. It's when we could identify the candidates. And to go one step further, in my perfect world, we would have one candidate who's a budget expert, maybe in public policy, another candidate who is more of an accounting type professional, that are both finishing their master's work, which would be logical candidates if you had an opening in your organization after you've seen their work and they understand you. It's the way many companies recruit. You go get those candidates and have them come in and do these types of projects. You identify talent. And so we would want to start sometime spring to summer, depending on when that semester or whenever their coursework slowed down, that they could come in full time. I just wanted to clarify, we weren't saying we're going to wait till summer. We're going to start as soon as we could get the part-time staff aligned.
It doesn't change my motion.
Okay. The motion is to defer the disparity study and reserve it at $100,000. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. I would speak against that motion, and it's for two reasons. Number one is that that the administration does want to get started before the midsummer, and the second reason is that I want us to make a very clear statement that the disparity study is something we intend to do, and I don't want to put a question on it by deferring it. So I would hope that we would disapprove that motion, and then I would expect someone to make a motion simply to set the funding at 100,000.
Chairman, I would like to withdraw my second. They gave me the evil eye across the room.
It was this.
The second has been withdrawn. Is there somebody else wanting to second that motion? Hearing none, that motion dies for lack of a second. Is there a motion to set the funding at 100,000? It's been moved by Councilman Jermaine. Is there a second? Second by Councilman Rogers. This motion would set the funding for the disparity study at $100,000 per the administration's request. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
You know, in our last conversation that we had before the vacation, you gave me some good reasons why we need the disparity study. You want to put those on the record? Because I think it's important that we know why we need this in the first place.
Okay. The reason why we need a disparity study is that that the way the federal courts have interpreted affirmative action program court cases, we are not allowed to have a program that specifically seeks to increase minority or female participation in contracting or similar programs unless a disparity study has been conducted in the past 5 years, and that study shows that disparities exist and there's a basis for doing a program. Without such authorization, which is the situation that currently exists, what we've done is that we've worked to assist small business as a proxy, and it works to some degree, but it's not the same as having a specifically targeted program. So the reason for doing the disparity study is to determine whether there's the basis for a specific program. It's sometimes also called a predicate study because you need to have something in which your specific program can be predicated upon, and so that's why it's needed. Okay. No other discussion. The motion is to set the funding level for the disparity study at $100,000 in line with the administration's request. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? There's none opposed, and that motion becomes a part of the resolution. The next item is somewhat complex in that the administration proposed that we subscribe to a GPS locator system, which would enable us to determine where all of the county's vehicles are at any given time. And yes?
But, excuse me, Mr. Chair, I did not make a motion to delete this item.
Are you...
I'm looking at my list. I don't have it on here. So.
You're not going to do this item?
No.
Okay. Okay. Then we can just move on. Item 10 does not go forward. Okay. Item 11 is soil and water conservation.
I'll withdraw this one as well.
Okay. That one's withdrawn. Okay. And item number 12? Yes.
I withdrew that.
Yeah. Yeah. Councilman Gallagher previously withdrew that one. Number 12, which I believe the councilman is definitely interested in on the Veteran Service Commission.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did not bring all my current information on this, but because I don't throw anything out, I do have it here, I believe. Yes, what I want to do is originally I made a motion, but I don't believe it was included in the record originally. I believe it was to be held. But what's happened is, and I didn't bring the letter from the Veteran Service Commission, and I thought we'll discuss this on the 6th, on December 6th, is there's a concern about the secondary use of the flags that the county pays for. And what we wanted to do was condition the appropriation basically stating that if the Veteran Service, originally if the Veteran Service Commission requested that the county pay for flags be used on Memorial Day, that they collect and return the flags for secondary use or proper disposal. They have since responded back and said they have no interest in doing that whatsoever in either case. And so I have an amendment to a motion that was never made, so it'll be the first time it's heard, basically stating that any organization that receives funds for the purchase and placement of Memorial Day flags would then be responsible for retrieving them for secondary use or proper disposal. And so I'll go ahead and read the amendment, read the motion. And the motion basically says to condition any request for funding from any organization for American flags for Memorial Day observances, stipulating that the requested flags be returned back to the county for secondary use, or that the organization verifies the flags have been properly disposed. So that is my motion.
It's been moved and seconded to incorporate this language into the budget resolution. Is there any discussion? Council President Conway.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out to supplement what Mr. Greenspan says, we're required by state statute to buy these flags to place on the graves of veterans on Memorial Day. So, and we've been allocating this money to the Veterans Service Commission. I think it was done some years ago because they offered the opportunity to do it, but we're not required to give it to the Veterans Service Commission. We could give it to anyone. We could do it ourselves. From what I understand, that we pay for the flags, and the flags have been sent to the various cemeteries. So I support this, that these flags should be, they belong to the county, and we should require that there's proper disposal of them.
Councilman Tron.
Just a question. Do you know if that legislation requires to be only for Memorial Day, or would it be also if there were flags to be purchased for Veterans Day or other recognition of national service holidays, whether we could be inclusive to not limit it to Memorial Day and suggest that?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I had the ORC because I thought we were going to discuss it on the 6th. I believe that the ORC is specific to Memorial Day, but we can expand our amendment to cover the purchase of American flags for any observance.
And I think that would be my suggestion, if you would accept that as a friendly amendment.
I second his friendly amendment.
I'll accept the amendment.
Buy them is
right.
what we.
I'll accept the amendment and.
Shouldn't be just for Memorial Day.
Yeah.
I would, for actual implementation of that amendment, I would suggest that instead of Memorial Day observances, we would put memorial with a small m observances, so that it's, does that make sense?
I don't know if we just said any observances.
Yeah, otherwise I think we need to check the ORC, because I know the ORC is the time when we're required to buy them. So I think we just leave it in.
Do we want to say Memorial Day observances or other observances? Okay.
Memorial Day or any observances.
Any other observances?
Okay.
You can buy them for Veterans Day also. It's
So the motion now reads, to condition any request for funding from any organization for American flags for Memorial Day observances or other observances on a stipulation that the requested flags be returned back to the county for secondary use, or that the organization verifies that the flags have been properly disposed.
And
I think,
Mr. Chair, I believe there's already in existence a requirement these flags be American-made. So I don't think we had to add it, but I just want to make sure that everybody knows these are American-made flags. We don't buy them from China.
I think Councilwoman Conwell requested a comment. Councilman Jones.
What qualifies as proper disposal of flags? What does that mean? They have to be burned?
Any other comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it, and Councilman Greenspan's motion as amended becomes a part of the resolution. Okay, now turning on to page 2, we're going to do these 2 other funds items, and then we're going to take one break before we go into human services. Okay, domestic relations. Councilman Greenspan?
On this one, Mr. Chair, I move that we defer $37,500 for an additional mediator, defer until mid-year budget.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
And any discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I would oppose this, absolutely. There's the Judge Palos, the administrative judge of Domestic Relations Court, spoke to the need, especially in light of the fact that there's an exorbitant increase of pro se litigants in Domestic Relations Court, as in all other courts, because of the economy. The litigants end up reimbursing the mediator. I think at the end of the day, there's going to be offset by the cost that's paid for from the actual litigants. So this might not even have an impact on the general fund at the end.
Any other discussion?
Or was she opposed?
Clerk will call the roll.
Calling the roll for this item, Mr. Rogers? No. Ms. Simon? No. Mr. Greenspan?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
No.
Mr. Brady?
No.
Mr. Germana? No. Mr. Gallagher?
No.
Mr. Schron?
Yes.
Ms. Conwell?
No.
Mr. Jones?
No.
Ms. Conley?
No.
Motion fails.
That item does not become a part of the resolution. Councilman Greenspan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item has to do with the land bank. This was a concern I had during the legislation that we debated, that the land bank was going to go right up to the $7 million threshold. The current budget has $6 million as a placeholder, with the expectation, as I understand it, that it's offset directly by the appropriate fees associated with taking it to $6 million. This resolution will allow the land bank to go up to $7 million, whatever the actual collections would be, not mandate that it be $7 million. So this is actually a deletion. I move to delete the additional $1 million per year funding for the Land Reutilization Corporation.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? I would just comment that I consider the $1 million to basically be a technical amendment to harmonize the budget with the legislation that the council passed, and so I recommend against this motion. Any other discussion? Call the roll.
May I ask who the second was?
Gallagher.
Thank you. Calling the roll for this item. Mr. Rogers?
No.
Ms. Simon? No. Mr. Greenspan?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
No.
Mr. Brady?
No.
Mr. Germana?
No.
Mr. Gallagher?
No.
Mr. Schron?
No.
Ms. Conwell?
No.
Mr. Jones?
No.
Ms. Conley?
No.
Motion fails.
Okay, that item does not become part of the resolution. We've now completed the items relating to the general fund and the other funds. For those who are keeping score, I would make people aware that the council is now below the administration's original request on the general fund, particularly in year 2013. We're going to take a 10-minute break and come back at 25 minutes before the hour and do the human services.
This is it.